Welcome to Dad Pod. I'm Mike.
And I'm Luke. We're friends here in Madison, and we both have kids. And at least for us, becoming a dad has been transformational. We talk to all sorts of dads in all sorts of situations to learn from their unique challenges, lessons, and evolutions. The goal is simple: learn from each other to become better dads.
If you dig it, please find us on Apple or Spotify and click follow. That single click helps put us in front of more dads, which Luke would really appreciate. With us today, we have Trent, and we're diving into the theme of balancing your career with your commitment to your family. We are going to talk about where we're getting it right, where we're getting it wrong, and how we've evolved in the transition from no kids to child to multiple children. It's a big topic. We're going to cover quite a bit. And as always, no one here is claiming to be an expert. We are here because we're curious, we're engaged, and we just want to be better dads. As I said, with us is Trent. I've known Trent for more than 20 years now, if you can believe that. We've lived in 3 different cities together, and I was particularly interested in discussing this topic with you, Trent, for a few reasons. One, you have 2 daughters and a partner that is a highly engaged parent and has strongly defined views about caring for them. You are also a highly devoted partner to your partner and to your kids. And meanwhile, for the past 10 years or whatever it's been, you've been working at startup companies that expect a high level of input and effort from you, which, all of which is to say you've set yourself a really high level of difficulty to land this plane in terms of balancing your career, your role as a parent, and your role as a partner. And I'm excited to dig into that with you.
Yeah, excited to be here. Definitely a lot of thoughts, a lot of scars, and happy to talk about it.
Great. Yeah. Before I jump in, is there anything that I missed, any context that you would add beyond that?
No, I think that's about right. The only thing I'll add is that most of my career I've been in tech, but most of my career has actually been in talent, finding people jobs. So it's within that kind of dual context. So I kind of deal with this stuff a lot, both from an HR and talent perspective of parents and non-parents and the differences of those types of folks, the types of jobs that are going to really sync with them. The changing landscape there, work has changed so much in the 10 years I've been in the industry. And that some has been great for parents, some it's been awful for parents. So yeah, lots of both professional as well as personal insights.
So before your first child, so pre-kids, just for context for us, what was your schedule like? What was your partner's schedule like? Where were you guys before the family arrived?
Yeah, we both had pretty high profile jobs. I had joined a startup that was kind of a rocket ship, and I was working, pretty long days and then weekends. And it didn't really feel that painful. There was plenty of time to still work out or hang out or go out to restaurants or bars or whatever. Even though I was putting in huge hours, and I got paid off for that, right? I got promoted every year. I ended up leading a team of 80 at one point. And so, yeah, there was you kind of were able to work, you were able to get your shit done. You're able to do great work and get rewarded for it. And similarly, my partner was kind of on a similar schedule where she had a really demanding job working for, nonprofit serves all these really big tech companies. And she was also, working, she had weekend stuff, whatever. And, I think there's times when that was intense, but it was mostly hey, this works, we're making good money. We're able to live a comfortable lifestyle, a very comfortable lifestyle. We're going to wine country on the weekends. It was pretty awesome.
So when that first child became when you became pregnant and the child is on the way, did you discuss how your career commitments would change with your partner? Was that an active discussion, or what, or was that not part of what you were preparing?
I would say we could have done a lot more on that front.
Mhm.
So I think I think we learned a lot about like what we wanted to be as parents and our philosophy on parenting, like while we were pregnant. So it was kind of like we both like, I think, since we were married, we both like knew we wanted kids, and we kind of reached that like echelon where it's like, okay, we have a lot, like we have compensation, like our careers seem to be going in the right direction. There's just like a lot of comfort, and there seemed like there was a lot of space for a kid. And I think that probably like drove the decision more than it should have. Just like, oh, there's space, like, and we know we want this, so let's fill it, I think like more of a fire discussion, like, oh, what is this actually going to look like? And through that, we basically kind of settled on this idea of like of co-parenting, that we're going to try and figure out like how do we both kind of share in like the benefits and the challenges of being actual like co-parents. And that was kind of like we talked about and like what our kind of vision was. But obviously, like, the real world kind of smacks you in the face. I was like, leading this, fast growing tech company, and yeah, like, being the parent you want to be is not always possible when you got like, when you have other priorities. So, yeah, we didn't really talk enough about it, I think.
Just to dive into that for 1 second, could you maybe talk a little bit about what that, maybe two-part question? How did you actually have that discussion? What is this vision? And then what was the vision, and how did it end up being off from reality?
Yeah. So, we got pregnant. We read like a ton of books, and like, I think like when you get pregnant, you're just like kind of reading a lot of books, right? Like you're kind of in this pause where it's like, yeah, like things haven't changed, but like things are going to change. And, this like quest to kind of like learn a lot. And like, I was reading books that were like, like, should we have like a home birth or a hospital birth kind of stuff, like Ina Gaskin stuff, but then also stuff about like, how do you get like your 6-year-old to read? And, it was kind of like parenting books from like the whole spectrum, but you're like a new parent. But like one of the things that my partner really gravitated towards was this idea of like connection parenting. And so she read a bunch of like connection parenting books, which is like, and there's different like styles of connection parenting, but all of it is like, hey, if you're going to set your kids up for success, you're going to make them well-adjusted individuals. They have to have a firm connection to like one or more, primary caregivers. And your goal in the early years, in the early, like, basically preschool years or preschool years, is to give them that connection, right? And doing that's like, it's not trivial, right? Like if you want to be like the primary caregiver for a kid, like you got to be there kind of every moment, of their lives. Like they have to really look at you as a primary caregiver. You can't be working like a full-time job and be a primary caregiver. And so like that was like the general philosophy is like, my partner's like, hey, we really want to make, in connection with our kids, like one of us has to be a connection parent, one or preferably both of us. And I think our hope is that like maybe going into it that both of us would be the connection parent. But in the end, as our first kid came, it was really like, my partner, she quit her job and she's like, I'm going to do this thing at home. And meanwhile, it's like, okay, now we're single income and it's all on me. And now I'm like, kind of like, showing up at home at 6 or 7 o'clock at night because I still have like a job. And it's like, how much am I really like connecting with my daughter, Now there were opportunities. My daughter was an awful sleeper in the early days, just like awful. So I was up at 4 a.m. with her. And then I would like literally 4 a.m. I'd wait until 5:30 where there's like one coffee shop in the Castro would open up. We'd go over there and get like a donut and a coffee, and then we were at a playground until like 8. And then like my partner would, wake up after she had an awful night's sleep. She'd take over and I'd go to work, and that was like kind of like my mental state was that I was like, working full-time job, but then also, putting in like 4 hours of childcare kind of before the day even started. And that was really, really tough. So I did get like some connection there, but it wasn't like even close to like a 50-50 kind of thing, and we don't have like family or like other caregivers, which you can talk about my second child. And that was like quite a bit different, but it was just like really all on my partner. And in a lot of ways that was like isolating. And then it was like also just really, really demanding, especially when, you know, our daughter was like not a great sleeper and was very like, even from a young age, very opinionated, to the point where it's like, you know, yeah, it's not easy. You know, it definitely wasn't easy in those early days.
What was it like experiencing that? And then perhaps, you know, you compare it to, you go in with expectations of just the pictures of what it might look
Yeah.
like. And then you're getting up at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. and, you know, just doing the working parent stuff. And it's hard. You know, what was that like for you as a dad and as a, you know, as a husband?
Oh, so I'd say like that first year, it felt like I was failing at everything. Yeah, I think I did fail at everything, right? It wasn't like a feeling. It was like an actual, like I view it as like an actuality, right? Like I failed at my job, right? Because I was like exhausted and like I had this like cesspool of a team that I was like trying to manage. And they were just like, it was requiring like a lot more attention than I was able to give, like unfortunately for everyone involved. But then like I wasn't sleeping because, you know, I was getting up at 4 a.m. with my daughter. And that was like, you know, levels of continued sleep deprivation that I've never experienced. You know, I'd never experienced anything close to that where you're like 9 months in and you're just like, if you have 4 hours a night, like that's great. But sometimes it's less. And then, you know, of course, like my partner was really stressed. So I felt like I was failing as a partner. I felt like I was failing my daughter because I wasn't like spending enough time with her. And I was definitely failing my job. It was just like, it was kind of getting smacked in the face. Like, you know, you go from pre-pregnancy being like, hey, fuck, you can do no wrong, and really like feeling like you're like kind of owning the world. And then like, you know, I turn the court page like a year later and you're like, fuck, I suck at everything. And I like, you know, I don't know what to do.
How did you keep your head on?
Did not. There was no keeping your head on, you know. We had this trip to Mendocino, which was like 6 months. My daughter's maybe like 6 months old. And it was just an awful shit show. It was like Mendocino was like 3 hours away. Because my daughter like wasn't comfortable in the car, she was like screaming. It took us over 9 hours to get there, right? And like I forgot a baby carrier, and this was like a huge problem, right? Meanwhile, like, you know, you're just like, oh yeah, I'm taking some time off of work to go and like connect and like go up whatever. And it's like awful. It's like, send me back to my shitty job that I hate, because anything is better than like screaming kid and like a partner who's like, you know, just you've drawn their ire because you left the one thing that could soothe that child in that moment. There was no like modulation. There was no like pep talk. There's no getting right. It was just like, you had to get through it. Well, we did. And like, you know, like there is like a light at the end of the tunnel, but like in the moment, it just felt like kind of endless and awful.
You talk a lot about books as resources, and I think we've all experienced the like, okay, I'm going to treat this like a class or whatever. I'm going to go learn, take classes, read. Did you have anybody else, like a human or other person or people in your life to help provide you any support?
In terms of community, we had like no community. That was one of the things that my partner, like, you know, she got really isolated, and she actually was really proactive. There was this app. I don't know if it still exists, but it was like really foundational for us. It was called Parenthoods. And it was like a location specific parenting app. You know, it was like WhatsApp, but for parents in San Francisco or your neighborhood in San Francisco. And through that, she got connected to a community that would end up being kind of like the foundational community for like the childhood of my youngest. And that took a little while to like, you know, kind of, you know, get to know those people and be ingratiated and everything like that. So like kind of near like the year mark of my daughter, like that community really started becoming that resource where, you know, my partner could talk about hard stuff, like the male partners in those different families, if they had a male partner, were really, you know, well read and supportive and had you know, thoughts and stuff like that. So that became like the closest thing I had to like a human to really like you know, lean into and talk to about. But I'd say like, you know, truthfully, it was mostly my partner and I like working through this stuff together. My partner, you know, was reading her face off while I was working. You know, I didn't have as much time to read, and we're kind of like, you know, triangulating on stuff and then like kind of, you know, trying to survive every day. But yeah, it was, ultimately it was like, especially in the very early, like the first like 9 months, there was like no one. It was just us. We were alone.
So as you look back on your childhood, um, was there anything that you brought forward from whether it was your childhood experience, observing your parents or looking back on your parents? Was there anything you brought forward or discarded as you are going through this, this ringer of a year or more, and as well as you move forward beyond that?
The thing that I brought forward that was really, really important, and I am like the standard bearer for this, is tradition. So like my mom was like super ultra into Christmas, like the most glorious like Christmas setup, and like really big into holidays. And I ended up adopting like, not just those holidays, but also like the Muslim holidays, because obviously my partner's Arab Egyptian. And so we were like, so I basically like, we're like kind of instituted, and we were like, as couples, we were kind of like, it was lip service to like kind of, do Christmas. We had like this small tiny tree or something. But then like when we had a kid, it was just like, it became really important for me to like bring that in, because that was like such a grounding. It's like a way to provide this idea of like seasonality to kids, I think is really important. These like markers through the year, this passage of time. And the holidays, I think, do a really great job of that. And so I would say like I brought that forward. That's something that I loved as a child. It's something that was really important to me. It felt like home. So there was that. I think like also like this sense of home is probably something that I bring to the family and brought from my parents kind of broadly. It's just like this idea of like having like a well-kept, well-organized home that feels like home, It's not like everything needs to have it, be in its place at all times, but everything needs to have a place, And that creates this kind of like grounding place of the home, which I found, again, very, very important. So like that stuff, I definitely took forward from my parents. Something I like discarded is that like, I think, every, I don't know, like every offspring is like trying to kind of wage the battles of their parents kind of, or kind of make different decisions. And my dad was like, he was a business owner, but he's effectively a traveling salesman, So he's gone a lot, both during the day, but then, weekends and all this kind of stuff. Like he just wasn't, that big of a part of my life growing up. Until maybe I got like, a little bit more in teenage years, I would sometimes go with him on these like sales trips and stuff like that. But like, it was, he was just gone, and my mom, was pretty much always there. She was, stay-at-home parent, and then she was a stay-at-home worker because my dad was operating his business out of her home, and she was like kind of the back office for that. So she was always there. I'd get home from school at 3 and like she was there, But I think like that idea of like, and me as a parent, like, hey, like there are some like, if I have my principal stack rank or whatever, what's most important, like pretty high up there is like being around. If I can't always like be there, like I at least have to be like around, And that was the thing, my dad just like wasn't around, And I think that's maybe like one of the, I like kind of go back and forth. I'm actually like really hungry to get back into an office at this point. Like, after like COVID and all that shit, like I actually like really want to go into an office. Like really want an office job. It's like crazy. But that being home due to COVID and all that stuff and really working from home was like, I think really, really important for building a relationship with my oldest, but then also my youngest who, I've basically been working from home since she was born.
So how did things change when your second came along then? That's a few years, you're a few years into your first, you've got a few reps under you, but now, whatever, the amount of work triples or whatever it is when the second comes around. So how did this all change once you maybe had found your footing a little bit?
Yeah. Just like talking about the footing piece, like it took about 4 years, right? Like until we had space for a second kid. So like we were not ready at year 2. We were not ready at year 3. It was year 4. And that year was kind of like a watershed thing. It was like, oh, me and my partner are going on date nights. Like we're getting the kid to bed at 7. We're being able to hang out and talk to each other for 2 hours. Like these were things that were like, did not exist in the preceding, 3 years or whatever. And so like at that point, like, we really were kind of debating, like, do we want to have a second kid? And I think like, we had always thought we would have multiple children. And at that point, like we kind of like, there's like a soul searching thing. My partner went on this like, week long like trip to the woods where she was just like kind of like meditating and writing and stuff. And at that point we decided like, hey, like we're ready and this is time. And we'd also, at that point we kind of repaired our relationship. We had a lot of damage to our relationship over those like 3 years. Like things were so hard and we like, there's so much, disappointment. But it like fast forwarding to like, having the second kid, it's like, what changed or like, what was that like? It's like, it's so hard for me to tease out the second kid from COVID. Yeah, it was like the whole thing just got like, a little more complex with the second kid. But now we were dealing with COVID as well. So now my daughter, my oldest is like, doesn't have school as an option. There was just so much dynamism there. Particularly in California, is like we were in the midst of like this like kind of 4 years of like really bad wildfires. It was kind of like we're getting hit by all angles where it's like, okay, we don't live close to home. We're in California. Like we're in COVID. We're locked down into our 1,000 square foot home, and now there's fires, and this 1,000 square foot home that was built in 1940 does not have like Sealy windows or whatever. So it's like, it's like you're living in a campfire, and you have this tiny, tiny baby. So all that is like, I would say it definitely added, challenge and complexity. But in that moment, in those first couple of years, it's like, there's so much going on that was adding complexity that's like hard to tease out, like how much was the second kid versus like how much was just like, the world was kind of dangerous and fucked up. So there's that. I mean, I'd say like now that we're kind of like out of those things, like wildfires haven't happened for the last couple of years, which has been great. Our house is actually like newer and has like been totally rebuilt. So there's like, when there is a fire, there's like no smoke inside. It is like, there are like a lot of challenges, but like ultimately like our daughters have built like, and this might be part of the benefit of COVID. Our daughters actually built like a really good relationship and they play really well together. So, and like my oldest daughter's like, she's someone that like, hey, she needs someone to play with. Always needs someone to play with. So like when it was just her, it was me or Sarah, like had to be playing with her all the time. And now we're starting to kind of unlock that benefit where it's like, oh, like she refers to the youngest as like, as her playmate. She's like, where's my playmate? We're like, yeah, go play.
When you've looked back on all these challenges, and even as you're talking right now, I'm always curious about this. Do you remember how bad it was? Because sometimes it sounds like you probably do, but I talk to some parents and it's like you kind of forget how challenging certain periods can be. Maybe as a biological evolutionary thing of like to get you to have more kids, you just forget how, but have you noticed that at all with yourself?
No. I have like deep scar tissue here, like on all fronts. I mean, like, the pregnancy part is not easy. At least it wasn't easy for us, the early years, our youngest was easier than our eldest, but like not easy. Maybe I think people do have different setups and stuff. Like I look back on it and like, I think about like what would have made like parenting, having kids like easier. And it's like two things. One, either living close to family, or two, being like very financially set, right? To the point where you can invest a lot in additional care. One way or another, you need a break when you're a parent, and either that's coming from family or that's coming because you're paying it out of pocket. And like, given our like lifestyle in California and like the fact that we don't live close to people, we didn't have that stuff. I think that built some really like deep scar tissue for me, at least, where, I had like, we had, 4 people's worth of work, but only 2 people. And that was impossible. And so like, yeah, like I remember it like really indelibly. I remember the pain really indelibly. I'll like joke that like, I don't remember my first like birthday. Like I straight up like have no, like we had a party, we had like people there. I do not remember it. And that's like one of the problems with like sleep deprivation is you don't have the ability to form long-term memories. Like I'm missing long-term memories, but I still have like the embodied like pain of that. Mm-hmm. Like I remember the pain. I don't necessarily like, remember like what happened.
One of the interesting ways I've thought about this, it's kind of asking the same question of would I do it the same way or would I do it differently, is to ask the question for your kids. How do you hope that your kids raise their kids? And
I think
would
like
you want it to be the same or different than what
Fuck
you
no.
and Sarah went through?
No. I mean, I basically tell my kids, I'm like, look, if you're going to have kids, you're going to have them by us or we're going to move to where you are, you know? Or like if you have $1 million sitting in the bank that's just like burn a hole in your bank account, sure, go ahead, have kids where the fuck you want. Like you'll be able to figure it out. But like unless you got one of those two things, my advice is like no kids. Like either like pull up stakes and get close to some family that is like, and like I've heard this too, like where sometimes like people do have this conversation with their parents, or like, hey, like we'll move by you and like you'll take care of the kids. And they're like, yeah, let's do it. And then like they show up, or like the grandparents move and the grandparents like are not there. Like they're like, yeah, like we thought this through and I guess we don't really want to do this. And it's just like, bro, you know, if you're like, hey, I'm thinking about having kids, like you gotta get like one set of grandparents to like sign up and like go to war with you. Or you just gotta have like a shitload of money in the bank and you're okay like having depressed earnings for like 10 years or whatever, you know? That would be my advice to the kids. I mean, like we didn't have either of those things. So you know, ill-advised. That would be like, you know, if they were, you know, getting that age, I'd have that. That'd be like my talk. That'd be like my equivalent to sex talk is like the kid talk. Be like, look, you need to lock down these two things or else like do not have kids.
What did you find most effective for maintaining your relationship with your partner as best you could through this, you know, through this venture? Because with all of the different challenges that you rattled off, how are you still married?
Yeah.
You know, that's like 50% a joke, but 50% like,
oh,
honestly,
yeah.
How did you?
We think and talk about that all the time. I mean, you know, our youngest or our oldest, sorry, we were in this parenting group and, you know, there's like 10 families in there, like half of them are divorced now. And there's like a couple that are on the rocks. It's like, and it's real. Right. And so, you know, I think that like, there is, you know, I think that, right, me and my partner have like the utmost respect for each other. I think that's like the first thing. And I think that that's like kind of a necessary condition is like, you know, if you don't respect the other person in some way, like things are going to come out and that marriage is done, you know, and it will come out when you're having kids. Like if you don't respect your partner, like it will come out and it will end the marriage. Right. So I think like, you know, even when things were really, really bad, I think like neither like me or my partner were willing to like really go there. We weren't willing to like, you know, really like take the pot shots or really like, you know, try and hurt the person. Right. Because we had so much mutual respect. It's like not, you know, maintaining your relationship. It's more like, you know, can you make it through the hard parts without blowing up your relationship? You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then it's like, once you get out of the fire, then it's like, you have to rebuild. And like, there's been many times in our, you know, relationships that we had kids where we're like, we kind of look at each other. We're like, our well is empty, right? We have not connected as partners. We do not feel like we're a married couple. We feel like we're in some sort of like weird childcare transactional thing going on. And like, that's not cool. And then we have to refill the well, you know? And, you know, and I think like sometimes like, you know, we're able to refill the well and it's refilled for like a month. You know, we have grandparents coming out to California for a month, you know, we're really hoping to like refill some of that well. I would say it's like, it's as drained as it has been in the past, but it's like, you know, hey, we definitely want to top that up, you know? And that's kind of like, you know, I think like making sure you're carving out those parts. We went to like this amazing resort in Big Sur last year. And like, we were at like a pretty low point and like the 2 days just in somewhere beautiful where there was like amazing food and amazing hikes and stuff like that like really did a lot, you know? And so it's, I think like insofar as you can carve those things out when you have like really tiny kids and mom can't leave them or whatever, you know, you got to kind of just like make sure that like in those interceding periods where you can't top up the well or fill the well up, that you're not blowing it up, you know? Cause I think that's like where people have mostly like end up in divorce land is that one of them or both of them have like gone there, blown up the well. And then it's just like, okay, how are we going to make this work when we're, you know, not married?
So I'm not sure what the question is, and maybe you guys can help me form this question. One of the things you just said that struck me is that 50% of the people in that parenting group are divorced or about to be divorced.
It's 50% are divorced. Over 50%, like it'll be over 50% if any of these other come through. Yeah.
What the question I have in my mind is how much of that is tied to your geography. And to tie this back to your career, if you and Sarah had different careers, would you have made different decisions around your geography? And then there's a second part, or which I don't know how it fits, but do you think geography and the pressures, the financial pressures, the work pressures, the culture, the fact that almost everybody there is a first generation, like their family is elsewhere, do you think the geography plays into that rate of parents really struggling? So
Yeah, I mean, I think just like a little like at a more conceptual or abstract level, I think like ultimately like raising humans is really hard, and you can't do it alone, right?
Agreed.
Like, and it was never meant to be attempted in a solo environment. So I think the people who are in California or wherever who are kind of making it work and their marriages are intact and everything, they're people who have figured out community, right? Whether it's their family or whether it's like friends, and if they figure that out, like it doesn't matter kind of where you're at, like I think your success rate's gonna be a lot higher. But yeah, I think that like a place like California where there are more transient people, I mean a lot of those families that are now divorced, they're not in California anymore. They're in Denver, or they're in Maryland or whatever, right? But they but wherever they went to, or whatever happened while they were in California, kind of doomed that relationship. And I think that's mostly down to attempting to, scale El Capitan without like any ropes or anything is like a dumb fucking idea. And going to some far flung place without any family, without any community or whatever, and having kids is a dumb fucking idea.
Did you have any, or have you developed any support for yourself? You've mentioned a little bit the parenting group and building community, which the sense I get is kind of for the family. What about you as an individual?
So, I mean, this is like, you got like all the balls in the air, and it's like, you got like, in order to have like a balanced life, you got to kind of keep them all, kind of up there. Like, I have not done that. Like, it's basically like, I think like my kids, and like, I think on the parenting side, like I'd say like, I'm the balls in the air. Like, I'm like a pretty good parent. I'm there for my kids when they need me. Like, I'm not the primary parent, but I'm like pretty good there. I'm keeping that ball up. The work ball is like mostly up. I'm not nearly as good as I was when I didn't have kids, but I'm getting a lot better now that like my kids are older. And like, but I'm keeping that up in the air, and I'm continuing to like, to be productive there. And then like, partner side, it's like, it's a little bit spotty. Like when we come up for resourcing, like the partner side is good. I have like no friends, like honestly. Like my whole that side of my, like in my family too, like my connection with like my broader family, like those two balls are like totally dropped at this point. And it's like I have like this Figma doc where I'm like, oh yeah, what people do I fucking know in this world right now? Cause like it's like gotten to that point where it's like, yeah, I'm like working and then doing all the parenting shit and then keeping up with my partner, that like I haven't invested in that stuff. And now it's like, okay, there's like some like opening, like how do I like re-engage those relationships or / build new relationships and start like kind of becoming more of like a whole human. Like my partner and I kind of talk about this, like being like a whole human, and neither of us feel like we're whole humans right now. But like, how do we kind of get back to the point where we do feel like we're like a balanced whole human, where we're like, living like kind of our best selves, not just like, a couple dimensions, which are really important dimensions, but like are not, it's not everything in life,
Talking about the career ball for a second, how has your relationship to that changed from having kids and from watching kids grow? You're early on, it's intense, it's going well, you're getting promoted. How did it change?
I'm a pretty good bullshitter, right? I'm able to like take it, like, and this is part of the reason why I'm like good in startups, is I'm able to take like kind of a limited amount of data and like make pretty good decisions. So I'm able to like be effective in a pretty time constrained environment because like I have that skill and ability. Now you take that skill and ability and you back it up with a shitload of time, and like the level of detail and quality of the work output becomes like, I think, quite incredible, right? Like I was at the point where I was able to basically read my CEO's mind, right? Like it's kind of like, like a dog can like tell whether like you're going out the door or not just by you like doing one little thing. Like that's what I was with my CEO. Like I was like anticipating him. I was like on it. And like before he asked for something, it was already done, you know? And like when I had kids, like, you know, I was still able to anticipate things. I was still able to like, you know, do, you know, quality work, but it was just not as deep as it would have been, you know, had I had unlimited amount of time basically. And that was like the main thing. And I woke up one day, a couple months into, you know, having my second kid, and I was talking to my CEO, and I said something. It was like totally off base. Like he didn't agree with it at all. And it was actually probably like a really, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it's probably like a really stupid thing to say. And I just realized in that moment, like, oh fuck, like I'm not like connected to him the way that I was. And that's probably bad for me.
Did you find that you were still, your career was still aligned with you as a whole person?
Like I didn't have any epiphanies at that stage, right? Like it was kind of like, it was almost like, you know, I guess like maybe my relationship changed from like less of an ambition point and more of a like, I need to keep the money rolling in because like I have a family now, right? It became like, you know, maybe less like high order, like, hey, we're going to like redefine how like engineers find their next, you know, 500K a year job or whatever I was like motivated at and taking the job. But like, but it was more like, you know, hey, like I've actually got to like be successful here because I have to provide for my family. And I think that that's like definitely like a different motivation, you know, and like now you're trying to like survive and like, you know, and be there rather than being like, hey, like I'm trying to like solve the mission of this company, you know?
When you take a step back, I think a lot of people of our generation deal with this question of like, what's my impact on the world? What's the meaning of things I do? Do you feel like your answer, so a big part of it is usually career, right? Or my job. But do you feel like your like top level answer for that question has changed? Like, what is the impact you want to have?
Yeah. I like, it's definitely something I'm grappling with, right? Because I'm actually like, you know, like when I was we were in Madison in 2012, and like I had this kind of epiphany of my like life's work is basically around finding people meaningful work that they love, right?
Yeah.
And that was like, and then I still think about that as my personal mission, and I think like I will be able to get back to affecting that in like a material way at some point. But there are these moments where like as I've like kind of stared down like, you know, kind of like a lot of failure in the last 10 years since having kids, right? Of being like, hey, is my real purpose in life to make sure that my daughters are able to live their dreams. And I kind of feel like that's a cop out. And I think both my partner and I kind of like, you know, kind of default there. Like we feel really down, we want to give up. It's kind of like, oh, I guess we'll just like make sure our kids can like live their dreams instead. And I do feel like that is a cop out. I think like parents need to like, and I think you should be realistic. Like when you're having kids, like, you know, maybe you should look at that a little bit more as like a career pause, right? Because like, and set your expectations a little bit lower as to like what you're actually going to do, or if you don't, you probably will end up missing kind of like the period of your kids' lives where they actually want to be with you, you know? So it's like,
when you're still,
you know,
cool.
like, yeah, you're still cool and they want to be with you, and you're like really like impacting them, like, you know, you're there. And then all of a sudden they're like in like primary school or whatever, and they're not around anymore or as much.
Right.
And, you know, and now it's like, you got all this time. It's like, what are you going to do with it? Right. It's not going to be like, you know, trying to live your kids' dreams for them or whatever. It's going to be like reconnecting with your own dreams, you know? I feel like my partner and I you know, tried to start a company last year. It was a total like bad idea. Like, it was just kind of like one of those things
Timing
like,
could have been better.
timing could have been better. Yeah, for sure. You know, but it was like one of those things like I was so itchy for it. And I had a really good idea I really believed in. But it was like, you know, yeah, timing was bad from a market's perspective, but like also it's kind of bad from a family perspective. Like my youngest is not in primary school yet, you know? And like that could have been, you know, more thought out. But I think like now my partner's kind of the same boat where she's itchy. You know, we're fucking itchy to like get back to our work, you know? But like, we also still got, you know, probably a couple more years before like our youngest is like set and we have like full-time childcare basically, you know?
Have you thought about the impact of your career as setting an example or a standard for your kids? Has that question come up?
I don't know. I kind of feel like kids don't give a shit what their parents do. Like, honestly, like, I mean, I think that there is some aspect, like I had an identity as like an entrepreneur because my dad was an entrepreneur and, my grandpa was, so it's like, I think there is some identity pieces there, but like the nuts and bolts of my parents did or whatever, I don't think was like, I was super connected to that. So I think like to a certain extent, like I think, if you're talking a big game and you have a lot of family values around like, how you're showing up in the world and you're not living those like either in your career or just in your daily consumption habits or whatever, the kids are going to call that out. Right. Like, I mean, we talk a lot about the environment here, and I try to buy polyester to redo a chair and polyester velvet redo a chair, and I can't do it. Daughter's just like, no, that's plastic. And I'm like, okay, all right. And so it's like, like
let's
they're
bury the
accountable.
chair then.
They're constantly like looking for like this hypocrisy where it's like, oh, you got these values,
Totally.
huh? Well, let's see how much those values really stick when the rubber hits the road. And you're like, okay, well, we didn't buy the polyester velvet chair, So like, I think that, and then like, as kids, like, find out what you do for a living. Like if there's inconsistencies there, they're going to point that out. That's like where like the rubber hits the road, I think like ultimately like you want to be doing work that even if the kids don't get it or care, that you feel like is going to be like a net benefit to the world, because like ultimately they're going to be owning and living in it. And
One of the things that you touched on that I'd like to dig into a little further is the idea, almost like the long-term seasonality when you have kids, and should you put your career on pause or on try to tread water a little bit more? Does one person do that, the other partner doesn't? Do you think that, just broadly speaking, working in the talent world, do you think people have the wrong expectations when they enter early, parenting early on? And what do you see other people doing in the, in your world of seeing a lot of, the talent marketplace?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, everyone's a little bit different. Everyone has different kids. I mean, we do have, families who have like super easy kids and like, and they made certain choices. They sleep trade at a super early age. They've got like a nanny. They're both working jobs. They're not as connected, but I think they're being like, I think the biggest thing is like, you have to make that decision. Right. I think where people actually go wrong is they don't make that decision. They're not honest with themselves. I was at a talk with a CEO of a startup. It's a hard market, and he decided to show up to this talk instead of going to his kid's baseball game. And his reasoning was that I committed to this talk before I realized there's this baseball game. And the thing that he like talked about was like, he's like, look, like he knows that I love him. And I have to set the right expectations that he's like really important in my life, but that there are like that I'm counted on by a lot of people outside of work. And sometimes like, even though I want to be there, like I can't be there. Right. And I don't know if that's the right call. I don't think it's the right call for everyone. I don't think like I would take that tact. Right. And I clearly haven't, but he's honest about it. Right. And he's setting expectations internally in the house, which I think like is like 90% of the harm is like a parent who's saying they're going to be there and they're not there. Right. And so I think that like, however you want to make that decision, like you should make it like eyes wide open, know that you're making a decision, know that you're going to be giving up some like really special moments of your kids' lives, knowing that you might not be their primary caregiver, right? There might be someone else in their lives that is their primary caregiver. And like, just really being like opinionated, like, hey, like I believe so much in my work, what I'm doing, what I need to do, that I'm willing to sacrifice those things. I'm going to be transparent, honest about it with my family. And wherever possible, I'm going to try and exceed those expectations. But like, you have to be honest about it. And I felt like that, I don't know, like, that's what I really took about from that CEO time. Just like, how honest am I being with my family about like what I need to be doing and like how that's going to impact their lives and my presence or not, And I think just like I think at least in my space, at least in like the tech world, and where whatever, I think that's where like a lot of people actually go wrong, is that they're trying to be the good guy. Like, no, I'll be there. I can balance it all. I can do it all. And it's like, no, like you haven't enumerated to the people in your life, like what your priority stack is and been honest about it. And yeah, it creates a lot of, lack of resonance. And
I couldn't agree more with you. And, just for the audience, that this exact situation, I was a co-founder, CEO of a tech company that raised a whole bunch of money, and I ended up on the other side of that decision. Like I stepped out of my role and transitioned because I did find myself setting expectations that I wasn't able to live up to. I lived with it for a couple of years, and I finally decided that my integrity, it was kind of like, can I pass up this part of my kid's life and not live who I want to be? And for me, the litmus test was the kind of classic, if I'm looking back on my life from my deathbed, how am I going to view myself and what I say versus what I do? And so that's just I think your point there is I would use the word integrity, like your own integrity. And are you being honest? But I totally agree. These are really hard questions.
Yeah, they're really hard questions, but it's like worth asking them and like actually thinking through your response than trying to fall into something or, like you said, like degrade your integrity because you're just not living up to expectations either at work or at home,
Totally.
To that end, Trent, what does a week need to look like for you to feel balanced? Where have you started to land on what feels right?
Yeah. It's a good, I'd say this is definitely a work in progress. Right. But like I signed up for a gym this week. Right. Which is like a big deal. Like I haven't belonged to a gym in a long time. I do a lot of bike riding. I'm dropped the kids off via biking or whatever, but I don't do I haven't belonged to like a gym or carved that kind of personal time out for me. Basically biking is like commute time. And that's how I'm straight by on the health front, is converting my commute time into exercise. But yeah, and like, trying to basically set up weekly things with other people. Like, there's a couple days in the week now where there's a possibility for me to go out and like hang out with, go and get beers or watch a game or whatever. So like so kind of slowly building those things in. But yeah, it's like, there's just like a little bit of, space. I'm still spending most of my time working, most of my time, commuting the kids up to school, and, now my partner and I are spending a couple hours every night, hanging out, which is new. So it is feeling like a bit more, balanced, but it's definitely a work in progress, one thing like, and I think that like both my partner and I kind of fall back on this is like, we kind of default to what the kids want to do a lot. And I'm just like, I think that's fucked up. I think like you should do what the kids want sometimes. Right. But you should do what you want. It's like, I took my youngest took a nap, which means she's going to be like up until like whatever, midnight. And so instead of just like hanging out with her, at home, like whatever, I took her to the Michigan, NCAA like game at this like awesome pizza place called, Cellar Maker in San Francisco here. And that was an awesome night. Me and my daughter was like hanging out, watching the Michigan game, eating pizza, and that like turned something that would have been like maybe like a little bit, plenty of their kids isn't always drudgery, but like there is like things that like adults like and there's things that kids like, right? And and so being able to like inject some of that stuff that like I like into my relationship with my kids makes everything a lot more gratifying, and I think like trying to like work that in where it's like, oh, we've been a little bit too much like doing whatever the kids say. Well, it's like, let's bring some of ourselves into this, whatever family and do some of the stuff that we want to do. And the kids come along with us and they enjoy it too. My daughter had a great time,
Do you like where things are at right now? Are you unsatisfied but moving toward satisfaction? In terms of your, how you're allocating your energy, how you're able to allocate your attention,
it's
for yourself.
I'd say it's getting closer. I think part of the stuff is the work stuff. I think like if there was, if we had a different, what's the term? operating structure or family, there'd be different types of work open to me that maybe like, might be more, more engaging or more personally satisfying or something. So, some of those things could change. And obviously, like I tried to found a company, like, that was great and it was awful. And, those kinds of things are exciting for me. And I think that, if we change that, if we had a different operating structure, where we didn't have as much, expensive shit in San Francisco, some of those choices might be different. But I feel like, or I'm hopeful, next year, youngest is moving to more full-time care. So it's like, what does our life look like then? I hope it's better than it's looked like, last year and this year's been okay. And, so I'm a perpetual optimist and I'm always like looking to the future. And that's kind of what gets me through the hard times. Is like, I know that like the hard times don't last forever.
You mentioned not blowing up the relationship. And I'm curious if there's, as you look back and also look forward, it sounds like you're coming to, over the crest of the wave. You at least have in your vision, a smoother path ahead. It would seem as you look around, what other things would you advise people not to do? Or like what type of, could you talk about some of the mistakes you've made along the way as learning lessons for us?
Oof. I mean, we talked about some of the big ones, the foundational, like, hey, make sure you got your support structure like set up. Make sure you've thought through that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I kind of feel like it all kind of flows down from there. I think the other thing, and this is kind of going way back, but like, is just like sleep and like, I think understanding your capacity as sleep when you are underslept, like, both will work, but also like your fuses are shorter. Like, how do you like, walk away when you're underslept and in like an argument versus like engaging on it? Cause it's almost always better to walk away. So understanding like how your psychology changes when you're like drastically underslept, if that is your experience as a parent, I think is an important thing. I think like this one thing that I think is always in short supply in relationships, probably all relationships, but really acute, is grace, which like, there's a lot of ways to like frame that, but it's kind of like just giving the other person the benefit of the doubt. Like I fuck up shit all the time, right? It's exhausting how much I fuck up shit. I get a lot of stuff right though. Right. And like ultimately I'm trying to get things right. And they just don't always kind of work out. And like understanding that like, hey, there is care and effort here and it doesn't always go right, but understanding like, kind of like the insurmountable things being asked of the other person to give them kind of like the benefit of the doubt when things don't kind of go the way you expect. I think it's really important. There's something like so like loving about grace, about like someone like doing something that's disappointing. And then like your reaction is like, that's okay. Like, or, something like that, where like, you're expecting to like be faced with anger and what you're doing is you're faced with like kind of acceptance. Like, I think like, anytime, like, I think like that carries actually like a lot of like benefit. Like it's a momentous thing that actually like kind of fills up the other person quite a bit and will actually carry you through all the times where that doesn't happen. Cause like invariably there's gonna be stuff that you just like, are really disappointed about and you talk to your partner about it and whatever. And it's hard, but you want to make sure that those opportunities for grace, you take them. Yeah. And like, too seriously, like, I give myself, like one of the things I've learned is give myself a lot of grace. Cause I'm just like, oh, I only had to bring like 1,500 items on this trip, 3 hours away. Like I missed one of the 1,500 items. It's like literally like we have like one tiny baby and two adults and we got this like pretty big SUV and it is packed to the brim where you can't see out the back window. And it's like, dude, I brought most of the things. And the funny thing is I didn't bring the right carrier, but I was smart enough to have a backup. It wasn't the best one, but I was able to produce a backup, which didn't totally alleviate the ire, but like kind of like ended the buildup, So I'm like, look, yeah, it's a shitty carrier, but it's a carrier. Boom. Trent has one.
She's like, it's made out of duct tape, dude.
it was an old model. It was an old model. It was a hand-me-down, It was the backup,
I do
like,
feel like I do feel like there are these moments when things come into focus, and packing the car for a trip is one of those moments.
oh, packing the car, packing suitcases, for sure. And we got this like massive checklist of shit, and it's like we go through it like, we're like pilots on the plane or whatever. It's like, did you get the baby monitor? Did you get the diapers? Did you get the wipes? Did you get the like hand sanitizer? Like many hand sanitizers, it's like, yeah, it's serious business.
Something that we've done is we have a shared Apple Note that is
that's what we do.
standard packing lists.
Yep.
And only one person is responsible for a category.
Yes.
So, Mallory does the overnight sleeping items. Mike does the food, and pack in, pack out, from door to door, that person is responsible for that. And talking about the grace item, something I heard was, catch the person doing things right.
Mm.
And I have tried to do that where once a day or, as often as possible, just, hey, I saw you did such and such, thank you. Or, that was done. That was really well. And it's so easy to only focus on the one thing when they're the 99 other things, they're right. Yeah. And you only give energy to where it was fallen short, and trying to, put just as much effort into highlighting the right.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more, man. The more you can focus on that, I think like it's taken a while. I think me and my partner like do a lot of that now, and it definitely does smooth out the bumps,
Mm-hmm. Well, this has been really good. Do you have any, honestly, I didn't even remember how much it's rehearing what you've been through is like, puts it all into a new focus of just not only the amount of challenge, but the length of the challenge, and the wildfire stuff being almost like a dark comedy to add that on to your experience. But one of the things that at least for the rest of us is a massive benefit is getting to hear you talk about it and what you've learned. And I'm wondering what you would tell someone who's thinking about becoming a dad or is early in their journey and is ready to soak something up from you.
Yeah. It's like one of these things where it's kind of like wasted breath. That means this is my parting wisdom, right? Is like, look, like you're gonna like people are gonna give you unsolicited advice, you're gonna ask for advice, and you're gonna think that doesn't apply to me. And the thing is that like you don't even understand the advice. It's kind of like like sixth or seventh dimensional space or whatever. Like you can represent it mathematically, but like visually, you can't like actually comprehend that. And that's what it's like when you give someone like advice, like, hey, like, yeah, it's like, you're not going to sleep at all for like 3 months or 5 months or 9 months or 12 months for me. Right. They're like, yeah, whatever. That's not going to be my thing. You have no idea. Like you can't even imagine seventh dimensional space. And that's kind of my, like, my feedback is that there is like a singularity here, right? In your life that like when you get pregnant, you decide to take on that huge responsibility, having a child, like it's going to change you in a lot of ways. And there's no way that anyone's going to be able to give you a lens into how that's actually going to be for you. So buckle up.
That's great. Well, thank you, Trent, again. It was shockingly, I honestly, it was as a listener, amazing to hear your journey and what you've taken away. As a reminder for the audience, this is for anyone who is a dad, has been a dad, or is considering becoming a dad. Anyone who wants to learn what it's like to be a dad. Hopefully your train card is maybe a little smoother than Trent's, but maybe it won't be. And finally, anyone who wants to support a dad, which obviously is a topic, Trent, that you touched on, and I think is something that's really worth thinking about as you enter the dad journey. So thank you, Trent, and good luck on the days ahead here.
Thanks, man. Good chatting y'all.
Thank you to Trent for sharing the challenges and learnings of his fatherhood experience so far. It's not easy to revisit difficult times in your life, especially when the stakes are as high as fathering children and staying in love with your partner at the same time. So thanks to Trent for going there. As we've talked to more dads, one theme I've noticed is many of us here in America don't have the intergenerational support that perhaps used to exist in generations past, and whether that's due to moving away for school or a job, or because the relationship frayed somewhere along the way. Either way, many of us are going it alone. I hope to explore that more as we continue on this journey together. And in the meantime, I hope this episode gave you some knowledge and wisdom to carry on yours. Before you bounce, I have a quick favor. Please subscribe to the pod. Not only does Luke love juicing those numbers, but it really does help put this thing in front of more dads.
And Mike, on the other hand, just loves juicing. We also now run a listener community on WhatsApp. To join, visit dadpod.fm and you'll see the delicious link at the top of the homepage.
Come on in, baby. We'd love to have you.